You know, we think of our immune system as this incredible guardian, right? This super sophisticated army protecting us from all sorts of invaders. But what happens when that powerful protector gets its signals crossed? What if it starts doing more harm than good? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into.
I mean, have you ever really stopped to think about what an allergy is? Or the even stranger idea that our bodies sometimes attack themselves? It turns out the answer to both those questions is, well, it's the same thing. It's the story of an immune system that's gone into overdrive, a phenomenon we call hypersensitivity. Now, the key word here isn't necessarily heightened or stronger. It's inappropriate. We're talking about a situation where our immune system just unleashes its entire powerful arsenal against something totally harmless, like pollen, or even against our very own cells. It's basically biological friendly fire. And yeah, it can cause some serious damage. So to try and make sense of all this, scientists have broken these overreactions down into 4 distinct types. You can think of this as our roadmap for the rest of this explainer. And here's the big picture. You've got type 1, which is what most of us think of as a classic allergy. Then there's type 2, where antibodies actually attack our own cells. After that is type 3, that's all about damage from these leftover immune clumps. And finally, you have type 4, which is a much slower, delayed reaction. We're going to walk through each one of these. Okay, but before we dive in, there's one really crucial distinction we need to make. See, the first 3 types, I, 2, and 3, they're all considered immediate. They're driven by antibodies and they happen fast, we're talking minutes to hours. Type 4, though, that's the slow burn of the group. It's run by T cells and it can take a couple of days to even show up. This difference, the timing and who's in charge, is absolutely key.
All right, let's kick things off with type I, the one most of us are probably familiar with, the classic allergy.
So here's the thing about a type 1 reaction. It doesn't just happen out of the blue. It's a 2-step process. First, your body has to be sensitized. I love this analogy. Think of it like quietly arming a bomb. Then, and only then, can a second exposure actually trigger the activation, or, the detonation. Okay, so picture this. The first time you run into an allergen, let's say it's ragweed pollen, your immune system gets to work creating these special lookout soldiers called IgE antibodies. Now, these guys don't attack right away. Instead, they go and attach themselves to these sentinel cells called mast cells, basically loading them up for a future fight. And the crazy part? At this point, you feel absolutely nothing. The bomb is armed, but it's silent. But then, the next time that same pollen gets into your system, it finds those mast cells that are already armed and waiting. The pollen links up those IgE antibodies, and boom, that's the trigger. The mast cells basically detonate, releasing this massive flood of chemicals, most famously histamine. And that chemical flood is what causes all those symptoms we know and hate: the runny nose, the itchy eyes, the wheezing, all of it. And it's kind of wild when you think about it, right? That one single mechanism is responsible for such a huge range of issues. I mean, everything from just annoying hay fever all the way to life-threatening anaphylaxis. It all comes back to those exploding mast cells. Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about types 2 and 3. Now, both of these involve antibodies, but they cause damage in really different ways. I think the best way to frame it is to go back to that idea of friendly fire, because these are 2 very distinct types of it. Here's the core difference you need to get. In type 2, it's a classic case of mistaken identity. Your antibodies are directly targeting and attacking your very own cells. But in type 3, it's more like collateral damage. The problem isn't a direct attack on your cells, it's the mess that's left over from a previous immune battle. These little clumps of debris that get stuck and just wreak havoc. So let's zero in on type 2 for a second. When one of these misguided antibodies latches onto one of your own cells, a few things can happen. It can basically flag the cell for complete destruction, or it can block it from doing its job, and in some weird cases, it can actually overstimulate it, making it do too much. A really powerful example of this is an autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis. What happens here is that antibodies physically get in the way. They block the receptors on muscle cells. So your nerve sends the contract signal, but the muscle literally can't receive the message. That's a perfect example of inhibiting a function, and it's all thanks to a type 2 reaction.
All right, now let's talk about type 3's collateral damage. So in this case, antibodies bind to these little leftover bits of invaders, and they form these clumps called immune complexes. Now, normally, your body is great at cleaning these up, but sometimes they get stuck in places they shouldn't be, like in the walls of your blood vessels. This creates a sort of biological traffic jam, which triggers an alarm. That alarm calls in the heavy-duty cleanup crews, and they're the ones that end up damaging all the healthy tissue around them while they're trying to clear out the mess.
And that brings us to our final category, which is really the odd one out of the group. Type 4, the delayed reaction.
Now remember, this one is totally different. It's not about antibodies at all. This whole reaction is orchestrated by T cells, and it takes time, a lot of time. We're talking a full 48 to 72 hours, 2 or 3 days, after you're exposed before you see a thing. That slow burn is really its defining feature.
And just like type I, this is another two-phase process. First, you have a sensitization phase, where specialized T cells learn to recognize whatever the substance is. Then, when you're exposed again, those prime T cells travel to the site. But here's the cool part. They don't do the dirty work themselves. They act like generals, releasing these chemical messages, cytokines, to call in the real heavy hitters, these cells called macrophages. And it's the frantic activity of those macrophages that ultimately causes all the inflammation and tissue damage.
I think the absolute classic example here is the rash you get from poison ivy. You know that horrible, itchy, blistering reaction that doesn't show up until a couple of days after your hike? Yep, that's your T cells orchestrating a full-blown type 4 response. It's actually the same mechanism that's at work in a positive tuberculosis skin test, and even in some kinds of organ transplant rejection.
So there you have it, 4 really different personalities of immune overreaction. Let's do a quick recap just to put it all together. Okay, so let's run through it one last time. Type I is your super fast allergy alarm. Type 2 is a tragic case of mistaken identity. Type 3 is all about collateral damage from those leftover immune clumps. And finally, Type 4 is the slow and steady, delayed reaction run by T cells. It's just 4 totally distinct ways our body's amazing defense system can get its signals crossed.
You know, when you really stop and think about it, it's pretty mind-blowing. This system, which is designed with such incredible precision to protect us, is constantly walking on this razor's edge. One slight miscalculation, one inappropriate response, and our greatest protector can become an aggressor. It's just a powerful reminder of the profound and honestly delicate complexity that's humming away inside every single one of us, every single moment.